The tapestry of horror is made up of many significant names: Shelley, Lovecraft, King, Carpenter, and of course, Barker. Even if you're not familiar with Clive Barker, there's a chance you've come across his work in one form or another. On top of his substantial bibliography, the man is responsible for the creation of Pinhead and the Hellraiser franchise, as well as the Candyman series, which is soon to receive another film interpretation. The author has also lent his name to several video games, most notably Clive Barker's Undying, a horror shooter that has remained well revered since its release almost 20 years ago. When I was a kid, a horror-obsessed kid, Undying was a game I always wanted to play but never had the chance, most likely because my mom was well aware who Clive Barker was and had no desire to subject her son to his dark and violent brand of horror. But now that I'm an adult, well, sort of, and well into this oh-so-spooky month, I figured it was time to finally dive into this one and see what all the screams are about. Hey everybody, I'm Kirk, and today I'm going to be taking a look at Clive Barker's Undying to see if this is the horror classic people make it out to be or something best left to the cenobites. But before all that, please remember to subscribe to this channel for all things strange and spooky. Alright, let's begin.
EA Games.
Challenge everything.
Undying was published by EA Games and developed by EA Los Angeles, who were formerly Dreamworks Interactive, and in fact were the same team responsible for creating the Medal of Honor series. Now, while his name shows up prominently on the box, Clive Barker actually didn't get involved until late into development, when he was hired on as a story consultant. While he didn't come up with Undying Story, he did overhaul several aspects of it, most notably the main character of Patrick, and in general, according to him, gave the game the texture of a novel. His involvement earned him an executive producer credit along with his name on the box for marketing purposes. Barker also ended up voicing one of the game's antagonists, Ambrose Covenant.
Let's remember who started this whole thing, Jeremiah. A pity you're so weak you can't finish it.
However, strong reviews and Barker's involvement did little to help the game's sales, as Undying was a pretty significant flop, resulting in the cancellation of its planned console ports as well as its planned multiplayer mode. The game did manage to garner a significant cult fanbase, and even today, Undying is often mentioned warmly when it comes to horror gaming.
I'm tired of traveling, or fighting superstition in its many manifestations. Even though it was me who chose to debunk folklore and mysticism, little did I know I'd end up being labeled as Patrick Galloway, the man with endless occult knowledge.
Set in 1923, you play as the wonderfully Irish Patrick Galloway, a veteran of World War I who, after a chance encounter with a stone and a sorcerer, now spends his days as a paranormal investigator. We meet Patrick returning to his homeland of Ireland after being summoned by his old war buddy Jeremiah Covenant.
Patrick, you made it.
At your service, Jeremiah. Sorry for the delay, but I've been abroad. What happened to you?
Jeremiah, who is on his last legs, hires Patrick to investigate the strange paranormal happenings plaguing his family's estate.
My thanks to you, Patrick.
What the hell is that?
Sounds like it came from downstairs.
Jeremiah suspects his dead siblings to be responsible for the chaos, and sure enough, Patrick learns he must defeat the terrifying undead Covenant family in order to bring peace to this dying land.
My family has come for me. I sense them, Patrick. By now, you and I know the supernatural exists.
The story of Undying is fine. It's nothing that's gonna knock your socks off. The setup is certainly tried and true. A weathered war hero is called back into the fray by a former comrade with the charge of killing a group of people at a secluded, hostile location. Trust me, we've been here before. But what I found memorable about Undying is its characters. Patrick, in particular, is a pretty likable protagonist. He's got that charming adventurer suave to him, but also some moments of action movie badassery, which you always need a little bit of in a shooter. It's too bad Undying wasn't a success, because I think it would have been fun to see the continuing adventures of Patrick Galloway, tackling other paranormal mysteries.
You're in no position to bargain with me, outsider. Give me the stone, or my brother here gets a trip to the family mausoleum.
Your adversaries that make up the Covenant family are also well realized, at least visually. They all represent a different classic monster type. Lisbeth is a bloodthirsty vampire. Ambrose turns into a large beast, kind of reminded me of a troll or even kind of like a Frankenstein's monster. Bethany is a witch, a really ugly witch. And Aaron is a poltergeist/zombie whose character design harkens most to Clive Barker's tropes. Look, he's got chains, like Hellraiser. Whee! While Patrick's interactions with these characters boil down to talk a little shit, do a little killing, the Covenants are largely characterized through journal entries found throughout the campaign, along with ghostly memories the player can experience through the Scry spell.
You're unraveling, brother, and you don't even know it. The king is more my brother than you have ever been, Jeremiah.
These are my favorite bits of storytelling, as they were generally well acted, and I appreciated the fact that the player has to seek them out. Otherwise, Undying's plot is expressed pretty clumsily, either through over-expository dialogue in the cutscenes or just from one of the random mansion servants walking up to you and telling you what's going on and where to go next.
Perhaps you can find some clues among the items in his room.
By today's standards, Undying Story is not terribly impressive, but considering the time it was released, the game was a cut above its contemporaries. And I do applaud the effort the devs put into it, even if the execution hasn't really held up. Visually, Undying is a charmer. The game was developed using the Unreal Engine 1 and is a fine example of what that tech could pull off. Sure, today it looks dated, but like I said, the visuals still charm. Level interiors pull off a scary supernatural atmosphere with a dark yet colorful assortment of textures and moody lighting. Character models look pretty good too. Each of the Covenants are characterized and animated well, and even the regular enemies like the Howlers show off some great animations. I also found the human damage animation to be far more entertaining than I should have.
Wacky waving inflatable arm flailing tube man. Wacky waving inflatable arm flailing tube man.
The voice acting is pretty strong too, minus a few questionable accents here and there.
Oh good, you've returned. Jeremiah has been asking for you.
Unfortunately, where the game really shows its age is in its outdoor environments, which today look rather bland, empty, and monotonous. To be fair, outdoor environments is something devs didn't really start nailing until last generation, so it's no surprise these look less than ideal. But compared to the other locations in the game, I can't help but be underwhelmed. On a more irritating note, the game loves doing these fatality animations whenever you die.
Fatality.
Which are fun at first until you realize these happen pretty much every time you die and you can't skip them or quick load during them. It gets pretty old. When it was originally released, critics and gamers hailed Undying for its creepy atmosphere and scares, and for a time it was considered one of the scariest games ever made. But today, in a post-Fear, Dead Space, Amnesia, Alien Isolation Remake 2 world, I'd say Undying is about on par with the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland, which is not a bad thing. Haunted Mansion is dope, especially during Halloween and Christmas. But like that attraction, the scares in Undying feel more over the top and cartoonish. Not so much spooky, but rather spooky. There's definitely disturbing aspects to this game, lots of blood and dismemberment and some haunting apparitions, but today they don't come across quite as shocking. If you're looking to be terrified, I doubt Undying will meet those expectations, but it is fun to appreciate how it scared back then, rather than how it scares now. Now, when it comes to gameplay, Undying is all about exploring the decrepit Covenant estate and its surrounding areas, dispatching its supernatural tormentors with an arsenal of guns, explosives, and spells, all the while solving a healthy amount of key and switch-based puzzles. Its structure mirrors that of Half-Life, as most shooters did at the time, being a continuous interconnected world with progression that is largely story-driven. The game thrusts you into several creepy, crumbling locales and even some otherworldly destinations that have Barker's fingerprints all over them. One of the more interesting spots in the game is this abandoned monastery, which you experience in the present as well as in the past, where it's snow-covered and full of warrior monks. As I said before, combat is a mixture of traditional weapons and magic, with the left mouse button handling firearms and the right mouse handling spells. There are 8 weapons and 8 spells in the game, and the most satisfying moments in combat come from finding effective weapon and spell combinations. Using the rapid-fire ectoplasm spell alongside the more traditional pistol and shotgun is one of the most effective combos you'll learn early on, beaten only by the Skull Storm spell, which pulls skulls from the ground to be shot like rockets. Oh yeah, these guys are fun. One of the more fantastical weapons is the Tibetan War Cannon, which shoots a charged ice blast that can slow enemies down, and I love the animation of it charging up. The spear gun is given to the player late in the game, which behaves like a sniper rifle, zoom feature and all. The only drawback here is the game's suspicious hitboxes. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a headshot. Phoenix eggs behave like a remote-controlled rocket and reminded me a lot of the Redeemer from Unreal Tournament. I can't say I love these things though, as they are awkward to control and are shockingly underpowered. This is the last weapon you receive in the game, and you'd think it was the BFG type, but alas, even a basic enemy type needs to be hit by several of these to go down. The worst weapon in the game is the Molotov cocktail, as there's a half-a-second delay whenever you throw them, making aiming during combat a nightmare. On the flip side though, my favorite weapon in the game is the Scythe of Celts, as it can decapitate most enemies in 1 or 2 hits. However, use it wisely, as I, on more than one occasion, found myself being the idiot who brought the knife to the gunfight. Patrick can also carry and use a cornucopia of items. These are things like health packs and dynamite, but also alternative ammo types like silver bullets for the pistol, effective against supernatural baddies, and phosphorus rounds for the shotgun, which can set things ablaze. The only thing that sucks about the items is that you equip them with a clunky scroll menu, which is not ideal when in combat. Kind of odd though, considering weapons and spells can be switched in a radial wheel, which would have been more ideal for the items. Fighting Undying's monsters is decent fun, however there are some enemy types in this game that can go straight to hell. Flying enemies make up the most irritating adversaries in this game. It's one thing to make them hard to hit, it's another to give them way too much health and have them show no damage animation when you hit them. Pick these foes off from a distance, because fighting these guys up close might result in a smashed keyboard. Shooting in general is adequate, but I can't say this game has the tightest shooting mechanics in the world. Weapons in general feel a bit weak with their damage output. I think the devs wanted to keep a balance between guns and spells, so players wouldn't favor one over the other, at least in the beginning of the game. But hey, it's a little silly when it takes multiple point-blank shotgun blasts to kill a human enemy. God damn, what are you made out of, steel? Human enemies in general leave a lot to be desired. Fighting creatures is classic shooter fare, as they often charge you, forcing you to be mobile. But humans just stand around in wide open areas, waiting for you to come kill them and hit scanning you along the way. It's not terribly fun or interesting combat. I think better AI and level design was needed for the humans. More condensed environments with plenty of cover coupled with AI that focused on breaking your line of sight. This would have been a fun antithesis to the more arena-style combat needed for the monsters. Spells are governed by mana, indicated by the flask at the bottom right of the screen. Mana automatically regenerates when spells are not in use, and your total mana can be increased by finding mana wells. Its regeneration speed can also be increased as well by finding arcane whirls. And if that wasn't enough, the player can collect amplifier stones, which can permanently increase the power of your spells. While the game wants you to use guns and magic equally, you will come to the point where spells make up most of your offense, as they essentially become overpowered and limitless. And I can't help but question if making mana regeneration a pickup might have been a better choice to keep the game more balanced. Not all of the spells are winners either. Dispel eliminates magical barriers and shields along with curing certain status ailments. Not a bad spell, but the instances in the game when you'll need to use this are so few and far in between, it's a wonder the spell wasn't cut altogether. Invoke revives dead enemies and has them fight for you, which would have been awesome if the AI actually cooperated. And lightning is just kind of pitiful and doesn't feel super responsive, although it does do fun things with the spear gun. Tip tip. In general, I kinda wish the devs had just cut the spells in half and focused on making the 4 remaining ones feel really good and useful. Same with the weapons. I appreciate the vast arsenal this game gives me, but at the end of the day, quality over quantity.
I'll make sure you infect this family no more, and that your mighty king will feed the worms.
Finally, the boss fights leave a lot to be desired. I complain about boss fights a lot on this channel, and sadly, Undying doesn't do much to change that. Here's basically every boss fight in Undying. Keep your distance from the bad guy while unloading most of your ammo into them. Wait for a special thing to happen which causes said bad guy to become staggered. From there, lop their heads off with the Scythe of Celts, and boom goes the dynamite. Sometimes you have to deal with multiple enemies, and in the case of Ambrose, you have to shoot his weapon to stagger him. Otherwise, it's all about unloading into a bullet sponge and then decapitation. The final boss is the worst offender, being one of the most repetitive and boring things I've had to play in a shooter in some time. It's a shame too, because so much of this game revolves around Patrick's confrontations with these larger-than-life adversaries, and once they happen, it's pretty underwhelming, much like my experience with Undying as a whole. All in all, I came away from Clive Barker's Undying a bit disappointed. I definitely appreciate the game for its atmosphere and attempt at being a cut above in the story department, and the combat has some fun things going for it, but I just think there's a lot of design here that hasn't aged very well in the 2 decades since its release. Now, I'm aware that there is a passionate cult fanbase for this game, and I am certainly not trying to come down on any of you. In fact, I'm rather envious. I feel like if I had played this game when it first came out, I would have been all over it. This is definitely young Kirk's jam, but for a new player today who isn't familiar with Undying, it's just not an experience I can recommend, especially since there are far better horror shooters out there to give your time to. In fact, next week's episode is a game that firmly checks the fun and fear boxes. Hint hint. If you are gung-ho to play the game though, I should mention there are some patches online that do offer gameplay tweaks as well as visual upgrades, so after installing, a trip to the mod DB is probably in order. And to piggyback on that, I'll leave you with this, and it's a similar thing I said in my Slave Zero review. The issues I do have with this game are things that I think are totally fixable, or at least tweakable, and I do really hope that another company, let's say someone like Night Dive Studios, is able to get the rights for Undying, because I think it would make for a pretty interesting remaster. Seems like the kind of thing that could and should happen. I guess we'll just have to cross our bloody fingers. But that's it for me today. Please let me know in the comments what you think of Clive Barker's Undying, if you agreed or disagreed with my review, and what sort of things you would like to see in an Undying remaster. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to subscribe, like, and share with your friends. It is a massive help for this channel. Looking for other scary shooters? Well, check out my recent review of Golden Light, a horror roguelike that is unlike anything you've ever seen. I post videos weekly, so be sure to ring that bell so you are the first to see them. I'm Kirk, and thank you for watching this video. Stay safe out there.